Hi there. Thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to our DEI Introductory Lunch and Learn. My name is Claire Katzenson. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I am so excited to be here and having this digital format of our DEI series that Hannah and I so lovingly and painstakingly created. And it is revised. So if you have gone through any of the other trainings in person, there is going to be a bit of a difference to these sessions now. But anyway, just a little bit of background. My degree is in critical race and ethnic studies. I also have education and sustainability under my belt too. And I've been working in social services for the past 3, 4 years now. So very happy to be here. And I'm going to hand this over to Hannah.
Hi, I'm Hannah Davis. My pronouns are she, her, and I have been in the social services field for about 7 years. I have a master's in psychology, and I'm really passionate about our topic and the connections we've made between DEI and child welfare. So, as Claire said, we're really excited to be here and presenting this to you in a more accessible format. We've had a lot of feedback that many of you have wanted this to be something that you can view virtually. So we hope that you're able to get some good interaction out of this and that it's as engaging as possible. We will kind of jump into what the DEI sessions are about and then show you our activity packet. So, just a little preview of what we're going to be talking about. We are really trying to help make the connection between the cross sectionality of child wealth, people that experience the child welfare system, and people that experience being part of other marginalized communities. We will be talking about systems of oppression, trauma that happens because of systems of oppression, and then how trauma manifests in the brain and in different ways that we can help families build resiliency. We have about 5 different sessions for you. And this first session is really focused on defining what is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what is the lens that we are using with child welfare involvement. So, really quickly before we dive into the content, we would like to draw your attention to some of the attachments that you have in your email that will come with this. One of the attachments will be a definition sheet that includes references, so you're able to dive in and go into the hyperlinks there and look at where we got our information if you would like to learn more about any of the areas that we are pulling information from. And then additionally, you're going to have an activity packet for each one of these sessions. So the first session activity packet will say DEI activity packet 1. And this will be what the first page looks like. We will be bringing this up each time we're going to an activity. Our intent was to make this as engaging as possible, considering that we're doing this asynchronously. So you are not here at the same time that we are here, but we will be giving you time to pause, go to your activity packet, do the activity, and then you can come back and push play again. And we will, be here to tell you what to do next. So if you do have any questions, you can reach out to your case supervisor and talk to them about things that are coming up in this training. And we're just really excited to be here. So without further ado, we will jump in. Handing it over to Claire to talk about land acknowledgements.
And I don't know if I totally blanked out from if you said this or not, Hannah, so apologies if it's repetitive, but we're also planning on having a survey for you all to include, how this was, if there was any improvables or anything like that. But yes, okay, great. So land acknowledgement. So this slide is a couple of different things. First is I am going to be kind of going over this information and then I'll be reading the land acknowledgements for the Medford area. If that is where you are currently located, some of these steps wouldn't be necessarily applicable because you wouldn't need to go and find the land acknowledgement or to necessarily read it aloud because we're going to take the time to do that. However, if you are not based in that area, please go to the blue link where it says this site is a good resource to find the specific tribes geographically. To expand on why tribes is in parentheses is because there might have been multiple different tribes that stewarded the land that we're currently occupying right now. So we just want to recognize each of them and understand that, some of them might have been nomadic. Also, there's so much history and time. So people move around a lot, and we just want to be able to, understand, historically what happened here. And also, many tribes are still active today, and seeing if there's any ways that we can engage. Would really encourage looking into the land back movement and interacting with your local tribes to the best of your ability. And the land acknowledgement for the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians is: we want to respectfully acknowledge the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians who have stewarded these lands since time immemorial. We want to further acknowledge the tribe's deep cultural and spiritual connection to these lands, in addition to its entire interest and ancestral area, which include over 6 million acres located within the Rogue and Umpqua River watersheds. These lands and the vibrant resources within them have been important since time immemorial, and we will continue to be a vibrant part of tribe's cultural identity for generations to come. We recognize the pre-existing and continued sovereignty of the tribe and thank them for continuing to share their Indigenous knowledge and perspective on how we might work together to manage and care for these shared resources sustainably with mutually beneficial outcomes. We commit to engaging in a respectful, meaningful, and successful partnership as we explore shared stewardship of these lands. Land acknowledgement for the Coquille Indian tribe is: Indigenous tribes and bands have been with the land we have inhabited today throughout Oregon and the Northwest since time immemorial and continue to be a vibrant part of Oregon today. We would like to express our respect to the first peoples of this land, the 9 federally recognized tribes of Oregon: Burns Paiute Tribe, Confederated Tribe of Coos, Lower Umpqua and Siuslaw Indians, Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Confederated Tribes of Siletz, Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs Reservation, Coquille Indian Tribe, Cow Creek Band of the Umpqua Tribe of Indians, and the Klamath Tribes. It is important that we recognize and honor the ongoing legal and spiritual relationship between the land, plants, animals, and people indigenous to this place we now call Oregon. The interconnectedness of the people, the land, and the natural environment cannot be overstated. The health of one is necessary for the health of all. We recognize the pre-existing and continued sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribes who have ties to this place and thank them for continuing to share their traditional ecological knowledge and perspective on how we might care for one another and the land so it can take care of us. We commit to engaging in a respectful and successful partnership as stewards of these lands.
Okay, we're going to jump in now to our first reflective. Okay, we're going to jump in now to our first reflective thinking exercise. And this will again be found in your activity packet. So if you turn to your activity packet on the second page, you will see these 2 questions and room to write your answers. Do you often feel challenged by your own thoughts and beliefs? Or do you often challenge your own thoughts and beliefs? What are some thoughts you have on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion that you're willing to challenge or explore today while you're with us? So take a moment to answer those questions and then come back to the video.
Okay, thank you so much for doing that portion. So we're going to talk a little bit about our comfort zone. First let's actually start with the graph part of it. Okay, so this is meant to be a visual representation of this concept. It is not perfect nor applicable to every single person. There are some ways that people think that the zones are swapped out. This is meant to just be an illustration to start thinking about how this feels for you. So the connection with this is that we're going to be talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the other main things that we're going to be speaking about is oppression throughout that, systemic oppression and the wide variety that not just CASA kids, but like everyone in the world are experiencing right now, dependent on your identity, how the world sees you, and different things, which we will absolutely get to. So I'm not just like breezing past with minimal info. I swear we'll get to that. So the first part is understanding where is the zone that we feel safe and in control, usually defined as a comfort zone. Then understanding that if we want to get to this outer layer here in blue, the growth zone, that there are a couple of different things that we have to do to kind of push through. And growth isn't just I'm learning or understanding in a deep way. It's that that is not whatever the new information is, isn't going to be like threatening or impacting us in this intense way, but now like a part of our lexicon, what we know and understand. We can speak about it to other people. We can continue to learn. It can become foundational for us. Um, and sometimes, in order to do that, you need to push through a fear and learning zone. And so, what that could look like is, let's say somebody brings a statement to you, or something that Hannah and I do a lot together is because we have a lovely relationship, being able to bring things up in a way that is, thoughtful and engaging. Is, hey, Hannah, you said this and I didn't really think that it was okay, or here are my thoughts on it. And that can maybe cause immediate like stress or anxiety in someone because it's like, oh my gosh, I messed up. I said something that was problematic. It goes into these oppressive systems. And like sometimes it can be the fear or the stress or like the spiral of those thoughts instead of it being, oh my gosh, did I know this before? Is it something I'm trying to work on and practice? Not as an excuse, but as a way to understand why. Is it something that you've never engaged with before? And this is literally the first time you're hearing about it. And all of these are kind of little stepstones in order to learn, in order to push through the fear or the stress or the excuses of why we're showing up and saying things and doing things in the particular way that they are if they're harmful to other people. So keeping all of that in mind, we're going to look to the left here, where it's just some things to ponder throughout our time here. Nothing that we bring up should be triggering. Since this is a virtual format, you can absolutely pause and come back, dependent not just on time, but some of the stuff that we do talk about is very heavy. And also we are more blunt with things and not trying to talk around it. We're trying to be very direct with this sort of training. So being aware for yourself, like what zone are you in right now? Like as you're watching this, what do you want to be in during our time together? Are there any that you're very uncomfortable being or haven't had as much practice in a while? And then how often are you in each of those zones in your everyday life? Like, are you somebody who you seek out different information, or you're very engaged in, let's say, like the news, whether that's like local, national, international, and so you're constantly having to be confronted with challenge and different ways of thinking? Or do you kind of just go to news sources that mirror your own ideology? And then when was the last time you kind of powered through, the fear, the stress, the anxiety zone? And what were the blocks that came up for you? How did it feel in your body? What helped you, be able to like regulate if it did escalate or anything like that? And just as a general for all of our trainings, take care of yourself, do what you need to, do what feels comfy. But, if you're here and you're listening, that means you're interested, and we greatly encourage you to finish and to be able to push through any sort of blocks that are coming up, because those can be so informative as a part of your own personal growth. I think that was all I had to say on this slide. Anything from you, Hannah?
No, I think you covered that wonderfully, Claire. Okay, so we're going to jump into the unknown now. When you hear anything that feels unfamiliar, uncomfortable, or piques your interest, please write it down. And then at the end of the session, choose one thing you wrote about to explore. Go down that rabbit hole, continue learning outside of the sessions that Claire and I present to you. Now we're
Okay.
going to do one of our first activities, Guess the Decade. Claire, you can talk about it, and then I'll show where it is on the activity packet.
Yes. Well, actually, if you want to go to the activity packet, I'll start talking about
Perfect.
it. So basically, this is a little activity. Whether you have like a scratch piece of paper next to you or you print this out because you're a fully analog person, if you want to just go through each of these 8 examples here and write down the decade that you think each of these examples occurred in, these are specifically for the United States of America. So it's trying to ground into this history a little bit more. And this is just kind of a sampler, dare we say, of some things that have happened in relation to either oppression or strides forward in justice, things that have to do with child welfare and different rulings on matters, gender, sexuality, lots of different things are covered here. So if you want to just take a minute to go through, and this doesn't have to be specific, like, oh my gosh, I know this was 2015 that this happened, and it could just be 2010s or something like that. So if you want to take a couple of minutes, pause it here, fill this out, we will meet you back at the next slide.
And I will give about a 30-second pause here for you to be able to get to the screen and pause because our next slide will be the spoiler alert, the answers. So we
Yeah,
want to make sure that we are not rushing you too quickly into pausing.
I think it's just the arrow, Hannah, on the left. Boom. Okay. So, spoiler alert, these are the answers. Um, a couple of the different ones that I think are really intriguing with some more information on them is, oh, yes. So, number 2, which is talking about the Oregon vote to make slavery illegal. A lot of people think that that occurred with the Emancipation Proclamation from Abraham Lincoln. No, sadly, no. Long history there. Look into it. Very, very intriguing, and sad because that's not what occurred. And in 2022, exactly, Oregon put out Measure 112, which was about making slavery, both in the language and like the physical action of it, illegal in the state. And if you notice, as a part of the question, it was only 55%. So that means that there was a substantial amount of people who also voted for this to not pass. And I think that's very informative, um, about what this state is. And, understanding that is helpful because that was only 2 years ago at the time of this recording. Another one that is just a tiny bit of clarification in case it was confusing at all is number 3, which this is intended to be not just about different communities and the way that they were barred from voting, but also the way that there were minimal language options until the 1970s. So if a woman's first language was Spanish or insert any other language here, and let's say reading it was more difficult or understandability because if you have voted, it is very jargon heavy, and the rules are, and the ways that you have to do it can be very confusing sometimes. It pushed even more people away from being able to actually vote. Number 4 is just a shameless plug at being able to learn about Christine Jorgensen. She was originally a veteran, and it was a very big deal when she came out in a magazine. And she was all of a sudden in the public eye for being the first woman in the US to publicly transition and speak about gender affirming care. That's not meaning that other people hadn't transitioned before, but especially the surgery and how that trans people have been here for a very long time. So that's not meaning that she was the first person like on these lands to do that. Within indigenous communities, Two-Spirit people have been here since they have been here, which is a very, very long time. So I just want to be clear about that part. Do-do-do-do-do. And yes, and then number 8 is speaking specifically about ICWA, which I was trying to find the most roundabout way of not just saying it was ICWA. So that's why it's the long-worded one. But anyway, thank you so much for your answers. Maybe as a part of this exercise, think about if there's any surprise that comes up for you with any of these, why that is, if there's any histories or circumstances that you maybe weren't aware of, and also depending on when your education was, they also, it's very, how do I say this? Different generations were taught widely different things. And even now, there's a lot of misinformation that's being taught. And it's very important, especially as we age and start interacting with the world in different ways. Like you all are in a volunteership right now, and maybe you have done that before, and maybe you haven't, and maybe you have worked alongside child welfare or not, to just be able to understand, yourself in relation to this and maybe some of the biases coming in. But yeah, I think that's it on this slide, Hannah.
Okay, so Claire and I have developed some definitions of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then other key terms throughout the 5 mini sessions. And we would like to take this time to introduce our definitions of diversity, equity, inclusion, and oppression. Claire, would you like to talk about them a little more?
Yes, and then bookmark, we should also show them where the vocabulary sheet is too, as a part of the packet. But yes, okay, so diversity, bringing together individuals of all backgrounds and identities, including those with differences that historically and currently experience marginalization and oppression, such as age, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, class status, abilities, and etc. Oh, sorry,
Equity.
did you want a popcorn?
Yeah, equity. The quality of being fair and impartial.
Inclusion, the action or state of including or of being included within a group or structure.
Oppression, the state of being subject to unjust treatment and or control. And these are by no way complete comprehensive definitions of any of these words or topics. This is just kind of our working definition to help guide us through this first part of the training. You will see definitions evolve throughout the 5 sessions, and we'll get into a little more depth of each one of these. We're going to begin exploring the concept of equity. As you can see in this slide, we're looking at the difference between equality versus equity. Equality is showing everybody on the same bike. Some people are able to access it and some people are not. Everybody has varying levels of experience with the said bike. In equity, everybody is getting the bike that allows them to access the biking experience, if you will. So the person that experiences something that makes them need to use a wheelchair is now able to pedal the bike with their hands. The taller person has the bike that lets them pedal most efficiently, and so does the youngest and shortest person, who is now actually able to reach the pedals and hopefully will not be injured falling off that extremely tall bike. So the principle here is that people are getting what they need to be able to access whatever the experience, the service, etc., that they are trying to access. We're going to dive into a specific example utilizing the idea of school lunches. So right now we have reality. The reality is that 30.4 million students are not able to afford meals in the US. 89% of households with children are food insecure in the United States, and 165,290 children in Oregon are food insecure. School meal debt in Oregon is outrageous in the 29 millions. And states that have free lunches for all only include California, Maine, Colorado, Massachusetts, Nevada, Vermont, and Pennsylvania. There are states that have actually preserved their universal meal programs into laws, including California, Maine, and Colorado. And the cost of school lunch meal per day per year is, if we're looking at like an overall average, is $1.73 for breakfast, which is $311 a year. And lunch is $3, $540 a year. Kids consuming meals actually dropped by 7% after the federally funded pandemic meals expired. So 7% of kids just stopped having lunch at school. And some parents do not have the ability to complete these forms. So all of the forms to access the free lunch program are not always accessible to parents that either experience disabilities that allow them to not be able to read, or maybe it's not in their first language, so they're not able to understand and fill out the forms. So we're going to now give this reality into an example, and we're just going to say lunch costs $10. So equality would be giving each child $5 a day for lunch. Kids that already have $15 can now get two lunches because now they have 20. Well, kids that didn't even have a dollar to begin with cannot afford a meal. So equality is not giving everyone access to lunch. Equity would be giving each child the amount of money they need for a full lunch. So if somebody already had $15, theoretically, then they don't need any money because they can afford that lunch. But for the child that has nothing, they need the full $10 to have their lunch. So it's meeting people where they're at and giving them what they need to access the experience, which is in this example, lunch. Justice and liberation is reconstructing the system and saying, why do we have families pay for lunch? Why is this not something that kids can get for free? Why are people food insecure in the first place? Why is it that some families can pay for lunch while others don't have enough money to eat? So it's asking those questions about reconstructing our society, changing the systems we have in place so that people struggling with food insecurity isn't even an issue, because everybody has access to the money they need for their child to eat, and or lunch is free for kids. Some different change that's coming up and removing this barrier altogether. So we're going to do some critical thinking. What other nuance is at play? What type of quality or food amount do you think each child needs for their unique body? So when we're talking about equity, we're not necessarily going, it's not going to be as simple as giving each child $5, right? If the meals at school are only accessible for kids that can have diets that are non-restrictive, if there's no food in the school for children that maybe are vegan or vegetarian, kids that have that experience a dairy intolerance or a gluten intolerance, or have intolerance, or have an allergy. And then try to debate both sides of why you would or would not want school lunch to be free. What is triggered in you or not triggered in you? What becomes passionate in you when you think about deconstructing these systems? And which side of that argument gives you the community that you want for yourself and for your loved ones? So you'll find this in your packet as well. So just take a moment to flip to this activity and think through these questions, and then we will move on.
Okay. So this is just an exercise trying to define equity, and it's about being able to fill in the blanks. A random thing is on the last two pictures here. There's there's three white boxes at the top. Please ignore those. We don't know how they came up, and we're leaving it there because it wants to be there right now. So you're going to be filling in the bottom four boxes. And so this is a simplified version as a concept trying to articulate these different things. So basically, you're going to be trying to fit in which one of these is as an example of justice and liberation, which is an example of equity, reality, which is experiencing inequality, and then equality. So you're just going to take a minute to try that out. And I'm going to just describe these pictures in a little bit more detail in case that there's any confusion with them. So the first image here, it shows that three people are trying to see a baseball game over a fence. And the first person has one, two, three, four, five, six, seven boxes. The second person has one box, and then one of the people is like dug into the dirt. Okay. And remember, the goal is to like be watching the game, not just standing in front of a fence. The second one, everybody has one box. The third one, the person on the left has none. Person in the middle has one box. Third person has two. And then the fourth one, there's no fence. And we do want to suspend reality just the tiniest bit because we do live in a world where baseballs fly and we want to avoid injury. So we're pretending like there's something else besides maybe it's a see-through fence instead of no fence to protect people in that way. So if you want to take a minute to be able to like jot down your answers and then you want to pause and pop back, we're going to then pick up with the answers for the next slide. Okay, so these are the answers. So on the far left is reality. This is trying to demonstrate that, let's say the person on the most left came with all of these boxes, they shared one with the middle person, and then for some reason, someone is standing in a hole. You know what I mean? That's trying to represent the reality and inequality in normal situations. I say normal being like everyday situations that this is trying to demonstrate. The second one is equality. So everybody has one box, but because of the people's different height, it's making only two people really see over it, with the third person still being unable to see. So even though it's like, great, two people get a boost, there's still one person left out. The third example is everyone can see over, and that's equity, and that's being distributed based on need. So if you see the person on the most right has the most boxes so in order to balance that out, while the first person can kind of just see over the fence by how they're standing already. And then justice and liberation is the idea that there wouldn't be a fence that's blocking the view, or what Hannah and I like to imagine that maybe there's one of those metal fences that you can see through, so still providing safety, but it's not in a way where it's impeding the enjoyment and the experience that people are partaking in at that moment.
We can think of the boxes as services or as different things that people are able to access in everyday life, like money, health insurance. This is a really basic example to help you understand the difference in reality, equality, equity, and justice slash liberation. But really think about the nuance of what this picture is showing in more of like an artistic way, if you will.
Amazing. So this is another attempting to flex these muscles on identifying things. So this is a kind of a still from the Giving Tree, and that is a very sad but great book. You know what I mean? Let's not give of ourselves where there's absolutely nothing left and we are a stump and we have given everything to an external person. Shameless plug for that. But so we're using this as an example, and the boxes that are kind of yellowish are where you would just kind of fill in or jotting down what you think your answers are. And again, we're still working with the four different labels of justice slash liberation, equity, reality slash inequality, and then equality. So in the top left-hand image, there is one side of the tree that is bearing a lot of fruit, and it is just dropping for one person there. The other side is not, and the person who's there is just kind of coming up empty. The right top picture shows that, actually, no, let's start with the left bottom. The left bottom picture shows that both people now have this ladder But because of the way that the tree is tilted, one person is still not having much luck with being able to get any fruit from this tree. And then if we go to the right top one, it shows that there are different sized ladders in order for folks to reach. So they're both able to get fruit. And then the right bottom image is where there is fruit across the entire tree. And you can see that the tree is now balanced out. So there's no tilt to it. And it's the same size ladder for both folks. Okay. So, again, in what Hannah said before, we can also use this as an example of different services, different things that people might have access to or be provided at one point or time in another to deal with a specific oppression or challenge or etc. So, we're going to just pause here for a minute, and then you can also read the little descriptions that are also for each of the boxes too. And then whenever you pop back, we will show the answers. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we paused, Hannah?
No, I think that was beautiful. Just like Claire said, remember to think about the nuance here, as the boxes say, access to opportunities, distributing tools, and access to those opportunities, and really trying to fix the system. So just read those boxes and think outside of those boxes.
And what I would say is the top right box is meant to say custom tools that identify and address inequality, not custom. That doesn't, from my
Yes.
understanding, mean much. Just to clarify. Okay. So then
Thank you.
pause, find
Pause.
your answers, come back. Okay. So starting on the left top corner, that is supposed to be demonstrating reality. So both people roll up, they see a tree just based on how the tree is and what they bring with them, which is kind of nothing. It's just their bodies. One person is able to get fruit, the other isn't. The left bottom one is equality because it's giving both the like little rucksack that they have and the ladder, and it's the same size ladder, but then there's still the issue of one of the people not being able to reach any of the fruit. The right top, yes, the right top box is a demonstration of equity, and that is because understanding that the tree is tilted, one person has the larger size ladder. However, if you notice, there's still so much fruit on one side and very minimal on the other. So then justice and liberation at the bottom, right, is meant to even out the tree. If we're going to go really deep with this analogy, it's also making it where, the same amount of sunlight and maybe water is being able to grow the tree so that there's fruit all the way around it and it's evened out and the trunk has different supports pushing it in one way and making sure that it's secure. And then both people have the little rucksack and the same size ladder and are working from the same place now. So I think something that's really helpful to think about alongside this is being able to understand the way that this is such an idealized version and maybe finding more complex situations that you're aware of outside of school lunches, because we've kind of talked about that a little bit, but maybe some ones that either like challenge or make you think about like, well, what would the example of the ladder be in that situation? What would be the supports to the tree trunk? What would create justice for this situation, and kind of just like have that little internal thought dialogue, also very much in recognition that we live in a society right now that most of the news that we see are incredibly sad and very disheartening, and we're not shown as much motivating or impactful things that people are doing in a wide variety of ways. And it can feel very upsetting sometimes. And a lot of what, Hannah and I have talked about since we've been doing this training is trying to also like instill the idea that it's like hope is a mindset and it is possible, and interventions or services are always something that can be improved upon, created, made better, and more applicable to the folks that are needing and wanting to use them. So we are using these more simplified illustrations here to be able to kind of get to the root of some of these other things. So if there's any topic that you're like, oh, I would like to do a little brain thought exercise on that, jot it down or take a moment to pause now and think about that some more, or just do it whenever you're really wanting to. Hannah, was there anything else that you wanted to say about this slide at all?
No, that was beautiful. And thank you all for giving us grace as we have things going on in our lives. I know Claire and I both have at least one to multiple animals. And I also have a 5-year-old that may or may not come out of Zoom during random sessions. So we will proceed.
Truly.
This
So,
is what you were just talking about, Claire. Beautiful
oh
segue.
my gosh, love it. I love this image too. Okay, so this is, you're going to be going to your activity packet, and there's going to be a portion there that is going to prompt you with some of these questions, well, with these questions. And they are, what are some other examples of inequity you see in our community? So making it even more, locally based. Like, let's say that you have a lot of opinions and feelings about the houseless community here, or the way that waste is being distributed, or transportation, any sort of those things that you can bring more locally, a topic that you know a little bit more about, so you can kind of tease out the little, all of the kind of subject matter we've been talking about. And then how could you apply equity or liberation to those examples? So that's going to what we were talking about, is like, what would your rucksack stabilizing to a tree and a ladder be? What would you, in your brain, you're like, I'm just kind of going here. What do I think would be helpful? And then something that you could also think about is looking into if that issue has had that type of intervention before, or if it's currently being worked on, and where we are in that whole process of trying to figure it out or not. But yeah, so if you want to take a minute to fill that out and then pop back when you're ready, that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, so now we're going to jump into the topics of diversity and inclusion. Move our little picture box out of your way. So when we're talking about diversity, we're looking at who is here. So for example, who is being given a plate of food? We're looking at what you have, that you're actually there, and we're looking at addressing the differences. So making sure that all the people at the table are from diverse backgrounds, that we have people that represent the community as a whole, and not just specific members of the community. So, for example, maybe we're talking about this lunch table and all these kids are sampling the new menu at the school. And we're wanting to make sure we have a diverse group of kids at that table. So we know that kids from different cultural backgrounds and different, maybe dietary backgrounds, are all at the table sampling the new lunch menu. Inclusion is how can we best benefit from their knowledge and talents. It's getting to choose from or create to help create the menu. Inclusion is about what the person is doing and also that they are feeling valued. So, for example, if we just had diversity, we would have all of these kids at the table, but maybe only one of them got to make the menu, and one of them was the one that was giving all the feedback, and everybody tested it. But that one person decided, no, your voice doesn't matter, and your voice doesn't matter. I'm only going to tell them that I liked the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and that's what we're having all year. Whereas inclusion is bringing those kids to the table and then saying that they all are valued, that they all get to help choose different items to include and incorporate in this menu, that their knowledge and their talents and their experience is of value in this setting, and that their voices are actually being heard. We're going to look at a little bit at the difference between diversity and inclusion and kind of this example as well. So diversity referring to the who is at work. So now we're going from that school setting and we're in our professional setting. It's talking about who's being recruited, who's being hired, who's being promoted, and it's a spectrum of different human demographic experiences. So we see on the red side, we have people with different physical abilities, different sexual orientations, race, socioeconomic statuses, different education, religion, nationality, age, ethnicity, and gender. So we're talking about a very diverse group of people. Inclusion is talking about how those people are feeling at work and how they're included in the work. So it's talking about having concrete methods and strategies to make those team members feel accepted and engaged when different people are in the same space. So feelings you might hear in inclusive spaces are being valued, being included, being welcomed, feeling safe, feeling listened to, heard, respected, feeling like you have a voice, feeling like you make an impact or a difference, feeling encouraged and engaged with, feeling accepted and part of the community, feeling included, if you will. And as you can see, you can have a diverse set of people, or as you can imagine, you can have a diverse set of people where that isn't being where they're not being included, where their experience isn't this welcome, safe environment, or maybe it feels unsafe and it feels uncomfortable, and they're just there to check a box, right? Maybe a company has a box that says they need X amount of people from different backgrounds, and they bring them into that company, but the only people being promoted into that company are white women or white men or people that are straight or cis or other identifying factors of more dominant communities. Well, people from more marginalized communities aren't being promoted, aren't being included in the decisions being made. They're just there to check a box, and they're not there to actually be heard, listened to, and respected. So transitioning it over to Claire to talk about our next activity.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Hannah. So we're going to be considering for each of these examples, is this an example of diversity? Why or why not? And then the bonus question here is what type of oppression or oppressions are occurring or being addressed with these examples? So if you flip to I forget if we call, is it the vocab sheet, Hannah? Or why am I
Yeah,
thinking it's
definition sheet.
definitions? Thank you. So if you pop to our definition sheet, there are also on one of the pages a list, a non-exhaustive list of a bunch of different types of oppression. So this is also being able to kind of kickstart this thinking. Let's say that you're someone who it's a little bit more difficult for you to connect a example with like specifically what's happening, or yeah, what's happening. This is a resource to be able to start trying that out. So if you want to try and give your best guesses on the next three examples, they are CASA kid related. So this is when we're really trying to, weave this in. So we've gone over a lot of different content when it comes to DEI, and our goal is to always be able to bring things up to connect it to this role and the reason why this training is being offered through this avenue to you all. So if you want to fill that out, pause this until you're done and then come back. Hannah and I are just going to be talking through kind of some of the logic on these examples here.
Yes, and remember the first page you're starting with is, oops, going a little out of control there. The first page we're starting with is defining diversity. So the directions are for the first example, consider if this is an example of creating greater diversity. If it's not an example, how could you advocate for diversity? So we'll give you a moment, and then Claire and I will jump into the discussion specifically about diversity.
And that's going to be page 13 in your activity packet.
Okay.
And then would you be able to, let me see if that's big enough. Yeah, that should be fine. I was like, let's zoom in a little bit more, but I could just zoom in on my own end. Okay,
Okay.
so I'm
Welcome back.
I love it.
We
So we're
like
not
to have fun here, even virtually.
exactly. Take a minute to wiggle out a little bit. This is something that asynchronous trainings sometimes can feel like a drag, and then sometimes could be like you kind of just do your own thing and be in your own energy. And yeah, whatever this is for you, we hope you're having a good time, if nothing else. Um, so I don't think we're gonna necessarily like read through these examples, but we're just kind of gonna give our thoughts on this. So for sweet Jenny,
Our
having
two-year-old CASA child.
yes, having to deal with family meetings to make permanency plan for her. There are many different people represented in these, well, getting invitations. However, it is being very much run by child welfare, and attorney and CASA are the main people who are being given airtime. So this would not be, well, this would be an example of diversity because these people are at the table, but this wouldn't be an example of, oh my gosh,
Inclusion. Yes.
inclusion. Sorry, I was thinking back with the inequity thing.
I was too. I was like, equality, equity.
So
Lots
this
of
wouldn't be
words.
inclusion
Yeah.
because the family and the ICWA representative are not being given the same airtime and weight. Maybe they're being interrupted a lot. Maybe they are having to confront with the jargon of this entire thing. Maybe the ICWA representative is not locally based and the link that was sent way too late. We see a lot of these things happen too. So Hannah and I really pull from examples we've seen as our time as case supervisors with CASA, to be able to also demonstrate some of these things. But then, so as the oppression, I mean, there could be a few different ones happening, but the main one here would be racism, because being an Indigenous person, first of all, there's the whole element of like being an Indigenous person in America and the oppression that comes from that. And then also um, having to deal with this entire like legal governmental world that is court and child welfare as well. Um, but yeah, if you
Absolutely.
also, oh, you go. What was that?
I said, absolutely. I think that really hit everything in that question. And also thinking like we were trying to trick you a little bit with this one because we're trying to focus on diversity on this slide, but we made it so it's an example of diversity and not inclusion to really get you thinking about the difference of those two. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Did you want to start the next one as well?
Yeah. So
Or,
now we're talking about a summer camp being offered for kids in Jackson County, and that we have these excellent CASAs who've met with the director of the camp trying to advocate for kids that cannot afford to attend. And it was determined that all children within the child welfare involvement can be enrolled and would be granted a scholarship to pay for all fees, food, lodging, and transportation. So this is an example of diversity. Originally, the camp would not have had the type of diversity that would have included children within the child welfare system because they were not able to afford the scholarships and not able to get into the camp. And maybe all the kids with foster parents were or resource parents were able to engage in the camp because they were getting scholarships through child welfare, and then possibly the kids that were in home plans weren't able to go. So this is opening it up to all of the children in the child welfare system, creating diversity. We don't know if they're going to be included once they're there because the story ends there, but this is a great example of CASAs advocating to help with diversity.
and something to also add on to that is because there's probably going to be like a time period where people are getting enrolled, word is spreading. Also, there is a lot of work that kind of goes into this. Is that there, it could be a delayed or eventual diversity that occurs. You know what I mean? Like nothing is overnight and progress is still progress, and that should be celebrated. But also understanding that when we bring these examples even more real world, um, that there are more things to think about, like time frames, and do all of these kids have CASAs, or are the CASAs able to do these things themselves? Plethora of more complications. But thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, of course.
um,
Do you want to take on Trevon?
Yes. So Trevon has a high metabolism and really enjoys and can thrive off of very consistent meals. His teachers were noticing that he is falling asleep and getting cranky when he is needing to, like before he's needing to eat. So a few hours after coming to school and after lunch, they decided to talk with his parents about this, and that he's just saying how he's feeling really weak and too tired to participate, and how that's getting in the way of his education. However, his parents cannot afford more food for him. And so now he is set up with a situation where he can let his teachers know that he's going to go to get an extra snack or meal from the cafeteria or nurse, depending on like snack, nurse, meal, cafeteria. That's kind of the thought, or wherever it's closest to his classes, depending on the time of day. So, this is an example of an attempt at diversity, but one where it puts all of the labor on a child. We also don't say the age of Trevon here. And let's think if this is a kindergartner having to first, or like say to a bunch of adults the reason why they're not able to engage in schooling. And, the adults there are trying to not like punish this child, but they're really trying to ask and having to provide justification for yourself. And then also, he's already the one who's experiencing the weakness and the tiredness. And then he has to interrupt his own schooling to be able to go out of his way to get food and then come back, which is inevitably taking time away. Um, it's one of those situations where it is great that he is getting more food that's being provided and understanding the limitation of money and the access to that, but it is still not full in its attempt at like justice also. So the was there anything you wanted to say about that, Hannah, or?
No, I think that's a great synopsis of the attempt at that diversity and even the attempt at like equity of making sure he has what he needs. And a great way to advocate for that would be maybe making sure that kids just in general, not having to advocate for themselves, have the opportunity to access snacks throughout the day in the classroom, and that the teacher is maybe providing those and providing reminders and check-ins on how people are feeling and if they need access to an apple or oranges, or even just making sure everybody has water. So like just ways for that to naturally occur during the day without children having to advocate for that themselves in the moment when maybe that's not something that they feel safe doing.
Right. And if this was your CASA kid, how would you go about trying to navigate this situation and provide support for him? And also, probably understanding that teachers are very spread thin these days. Class sizes are usually huge for like the ratio between teachers and students. So how would you go about that? And then the type of oppression occurring here would be, I can't remember the exact term, but it would be one where it has to deal with the intake of food and the way that that affects our energy. And then also, there's the classism here with the access to food or not.
Oh, and
And
classism above in the summer camp example, because I think I forgot to say that.
yeah.
Racism. And even
So,
here, maybe with Trevon, it could be ableism a little bit, depending on if his, condition comes from something that makes him, that is like a disability. For example, people that experience diabetes or some other ailment could be considered debilitating throughout the day if they're not getting their services that they need.
absolutely. Thank you for that. So we are going to go to our next slide and scenario. So then this is going to be the next page in your activity packet. And this one is going to be trying to tease out inclusivity or not. So is this an example of being inclusive? If they are not, how would you advocate for greater inclusivity or justice, however that best makes sense to you? And then the bonus question is, again, what type of oppression or oppressions are occurring or being addressed within these examples? So if you want to pause this here, and then we'll pop back in a little second and go through these.
Okay, so I will start us off with Carrie. I'm giving you another second in case you still haven't paused. Okay, Carrie is a 10-year-old child that experiences ADHD, emotional dysregulation, and impulse control. He often gets sent to the principal's office because the teachers cannot meet his needs. He misses class time, recess, and lunch, and his peer in lunch with his peers on a regular basis. Carrie is a example. His scenario is modeled off of one that we see really frequently in the child welfare system, where children that have either these diagnoses or maybe have just experienced a lot of trauma. And I say just, but obviously experiencing the trauma that our kids have faced is a really big deal. And a lot of the children, because of that, have impulse control issues, trauma related behaviors. And we see all the time these children getting pulled out of class, being sent home, not being able to maintain on the bus or at school, etc. So I think that the real point Claire and I are trying to get at in this specific scenario is that this is not an inclusive environment for the child. They're not giving the child what they need to be successful in that environment. It is they're being excluded from lunch, they're being excluded from activities because the school does not have the services in place to meet their needs. So, this isn't putting the blame or the onus on the teachers by any means, because the teachers cannot likely manage the need of one child that's having all of these experiences while they're also managing the need of 20, 25, 30 students. But what needs to happen, is again that idea of social justice. What can we put in place in the schools to help this child maintain throughout the day? I have seen a lot of CASAs, especially CASAs that are retired and or work in the school system, be able to spend days with the child in their classroom to help them maintain. Sometimes kids are able to get a one-on-one aid. Other times they're just kicked out of that school and sent somewhere else. So yeah, an example of not having an inclusive experience in school. And Claire, I would think that a type of oppression for this would be ableism again.
Yes, absolutely. And then this also being something that happens a lot with CASA kids is that, there talk with your case supervisor if this is a situation that you're like, hey, I'm getting inklings that this is what's happening with my kid here. Because there are a lot of things that, might have gone a little farther back in the day, like an IEP. But sometimes, depending on the school and the services that the school are able to have, an IEP falls flat still now. So being able to really understand what your options are at the school, what the child options are, and what I mean by you is you being able to advocate on behalf of this kid. So yeah, I would say for any of these examples, if any of this is hitting a little bit close to, oh, this seems a little similar, just have a little chitty chat, see how that goes. So our next example is going to be a 16-year-old that has regular family meetings. Kid is always invited, however, they're just talked over. Um, Obviously, as the person who is experiencing their own life, they have valuable input, but maybe their ideas or solutions or different perspective isn't being taken seriously. And so they feel like their voice isn't heard and their voice isn't being heard. Maybe it's being continually talked over, like physically being interrupted. Maybe after they say something, it's just very quickly like, well, that's unrealistic. You're 16. You can't get emancipated right now. It's going to be too hard to do that. Da 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 da. All of these different things. This would be an example of not inclusion because even though they are there, it is not their words aren't even being like recognized in a meaningful way. And as a CASA, if you're also invited to which you are invited to like every meeting, um, for these ones, if you are noticing this, I think that there are like some very simple interventions where, like, let's say you see it happen once in a meeting, someone's going to try and interrupt the kid again, and then you're just like, hey, I'm really wanting this insert person's name to really speak. Like, I'm very interested in what they say. It could be echoing what they're saying. It could be like, even if you don't have nothing necessarily to add, or it's like, yeah, let's think about this as an option, let's pursue it, I'll chat with them about these things. Being able to bolster and also take seriously, we should be taking kids seriously across the board, but especially when you're a teenager and in this and like experiencing life in the system, so many people are not taking you seriously in a wide genre of in many genres of your life. So even being able to like have a conversation with this kid and being able to see how they're feeling, and all of those different things. So this would be like the oppression would be an example of ageism, where maybe it's because of their age and the lack of experience that usually comes with being younger. Again, that is an assumption that is inherent in ageism, is like, you're younger, you've had less life experiences, therefore you're not worthy of as much respect and um like validity in what you're saying. Yeah. And then like, what would you do? Like, I threw a lot of things out, but it's like, this is your CASA kid. What are the things you would do? What are the things you feel comfortable doing? What are the things you don't feel comfortable doing? Also, in all of these examples, you're like, ooh, I don't know how to ask for an IEP, but I'm really good with like emails and asking to chat and seeing what options are. So shameless plug throughout that. And Hannah, do you want to
Yeah.
take us away?
Yeah, that was wonderful, Claire. Loved it. And we don't expect you to know all of these examples of oppression. You know, we're going to talk about that in future videos, but we just want to get you familiar with thinking about that, like what kind of oppression could be taking place here, and familiar with some of the terms that are going to be coming up in future sessions. So this last example is your CASA youth told you that they're now going by the name Nick and using they them pronouns. You ask them if there was any person or place that it is not safe to call them by their new name and pronouns. Nick said that only people really close to them knows at this point, and they would like to be referred to with their previous name and pronouns to people outside of their circle. When writing a recent report, you used their assigned at birth pronouns. So this is an example of inclusivity because you are listening to Nick's voice and hearing them when they say that they do not feel safe outside of their immediate circle. So even though you're not using they them pronouns and you're not using Nick's new name or Nick's preferred name in their report about them, you are still acknowledging, recognizing, and honoring their voice by using what they feel safe and comfortable, because you do not want to out somebody and create a situation that could be dangerous and harmful for them. So it is kind of a tricky question, because if Nick had said, yes, everybody knows, and I want you to use that, and then you didn't, that would not be an example of inclusion, right? Because you wouldn't be hearing their voice. But in this case, they're telling you, please don't include that information because I'm not safe. And had you not done that and been in, not inclusive, then that could be an example of transphobia.
Which also, if you have a CASA kid who is either using differing pronouns than the ones assigned at birth, different name, even if it's a nickname, there's a thing that you can do in reports where and the child is comfortable with that being shared. There's a thing that you can do in reports where you just have a line at the top where you like clearly state like the child is using like this is their name, these are their pronouns, they will be referred to such throughout the remainder of the document. So there's also, which wasn't the case before, and that's kind of a recent thing, which is like a really cool win. So we're not dead naming or misgendering kids
And
intentionally.
please check with your case supervisor for the most current practice because we know that laws and things change. And recently, from when we were making this video recently, there was a change where you have to get permission from the youth
Mhm.
before you can disclose their pronouns. So make sure that you're asking for updated information, given you could be watching this video, the same year that we're recording it, or maybe several years later if CASA continues to use our training. So just make sure you're always asking for that updated information.
Thank you so much for that, Hannah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, next slide.
Pass
So
it back over to you.
this is kind of our segue to the next training that we're going to be having. And this is the importance of belonging. So there's a lot of different terms here. As you can see, there's the diversity, equity, and inclusion as like the outside Venn diagram portion. And then belonging is in the middle. And the reason why DEI is so important is because when it's done correctly, done in a way that's meaningful and impactful, it can bring the sense of belonging that is the goal for like any community. You know what I mean? Think of this CASA community that you're in. I'm assuming, but that you want to feel like you belong in this setting. You know what I mean? Being around people that you're connecting with on like a mission and value sense, being able to work in a field that maybe you haven't before, but you're still trying to, do what you can with it. So I'm bringing this up to be able to, the DEI, the definitions of it all is kind of this first layer in being able to not understand necessarily, but we're going to be stacking each is like each of these trainings are meant to be layered on top of each other. Like, yes, you can absolutely just like watch one and you're like, oh, I don't know as much about this topic as the other one. Cool, great, love it. Thank you so much for your time and energy. But with this specific one, we're really trying to be able to articulate and talk about the importance of belonging. And Hannah is going to lead us through an absolutely beautiful training on the impacts of trauma on the brain and how trauma and systemic oppression has a way of curating a space and a society that makes less and less people feel like they are belonging and a part of and included in a group. So whatever. And in our most of our examples is like American based to keep it more relevant and local um in that way. But then let me go to these notes really quick and see if I missed anything. Oh yeah, okay. So something I also like to tie this into is that you need all three of these aspects, the D, the E, the I, in order to get to justice as a synonym to belonging as well. So without one of these things, the whole idea falls flat. Like there's either not safety, not community, not understanding, not justice, not equality, not accessibility. And that's just, I don't know about you. That's not necessarily the world I'm very interested in taking part in and trying to curate and change and move forward and progress to. So if you want, you could definitely zoom in and each of these little portions where it's on the outside of belonging talk about what does inclusion and diversity without equity look like, and what does equity and diversity without inclusion look like, and what does inclusion and equity without diversity look like. An entire tongue twister there. And being able to maybe think of some examples of these, like maybe you have jotted down an example throughout this training and you want to kind of apply it to this little Venn diagram framework. Anyway, long story short, we will be bringing this up later and expanding on these concepts.
Okay, so we're going to end the training with a reflective thinking exercise. And you'll go back to your packet. This should be the last time you're in there for this. this session, and you're going to answer, did this training challenge any of your existing beliefs about diversity, equity, and inclusion? What are some of the actionable steps you could take to becoming more equitable, inclusive in your advocacy? And what do you think the impact of not belonging could have on a child's brain? And then, like Claire said, we will actually be jumping into that during our next session, talking about the neuroscience behind belonging, which is exciting, along with a lot of other stuff about the brain.
Mhm.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for joining us today. And we are just so glad to be offering these sessions virtually. Please give any feedback that you have when you're done with the series using the link that will get sent out. And we appreciate you all. Anything else to say, Claire?
Thank you all so much. It's an honor and a privilege. I hope you have a great rest of your day or evening or whatever the heck the time is whenever you're watching this. Get some water, pat yourself on the back, and go out and frolic and chat with people about this stuff too. So, thank you so much and hope you have a good one.